You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we have some disgusting news here. We already know over the last few days that Donald Trump was seeking to fire the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia because that U.S. attorney wouldn't indict Tish James for non-existent crimes related to mortgage fraud. We now have an update as far as that office is concerned. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, Brian, this story is not only disgusting, it is rule of law busting, but it's not terribly surprising because Donald Trump is forever, bloviating about how I'm going to prosecute my political opponents. I'm going to prosecute my foes, my enemy going back 10 years. I'm going to lock up Hillary Clinton. And a cast of hundreds of people have been included in Donald Trump's rants about how I'm going to criminally prosecute them. And none of them have been criminally prosecuted. Kind of feels like these threats become hollow over time. But it seems like he has been insistent that he wants New York State Attorney General Tish James indicted for something. In fact, he is quoted recently as said, well, she must have done something. Turns out, after a 5-month investigation by the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, she apparently has done nothing. There is no evidence that would support bringing a criminal charge for mortgage fraud. So when Donald Trump realized that the U.S. attorney he installed, he appointed in the Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, a guy named Eric Siebert, would not indict Tish James, or it looks like it was trending in that direction. He said, I want him gone. And so Eric Siebert, being a dutiful public servant and being somebody who serves at the will of the president, every political appointee can be booted from their position for any reason or no reason at all, unlike career civil servants who have some employment rights if they are wrongfully fired or terminated. U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert said, okay, then I'm out. I'm going to self-select, and he just resigned his position as U.S. Attorney. And now we have a new person named, somebody named Mary, who goes by Maggie Clearary. She has been announced as the acting U.S. attorney in that U.S. Attorney's Office in Virginia. And boy, talk about stepping into a horrific situation, because she knows that her predecessor reached the conclusion that there's no there, and he actually honored his loyalty to the Constitution and declined to indict Tish James just because Donald Trump wanted him to. And now she will obviously have a decision to make. The question becomes, what kind of a person, what kind of a prosecutor, what kind of a U.S. attorney is she? Will she be bound by her ethical obligations not to bring a case that is unsupported by the evidence? Or will she be a Donald Trump flunky and fumble forward to, an indictment against Tish James, which, Brian, I predict if she does that, she is not going to make out well in federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia.
Glenn, can you dig into a little bit of her background as it relates to January 6th?
Yeah, I sure can. So I went down a rabbit hole with respect to the information available about Mary Clearary. Now, on the upside, she's a former prosecutor. She worked in a local prosecution office not too far from where I am here in Northern Virginia, and it's called Culpeper County. She prosecuted some cases there. She also worked for a brief period of time as a federal prosecutor in what's called the Western District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office. The main office in the Western District is in Charlottesville, Virginia, a stone's throw from the University of Virginia campus. She was then elevated by Governor Youngkin here in Virginia to a position, Deputy Secretary for Public Safety. She's been very active in Republican politics. So maybe it's not terribly surprising given some of her Republican bona fides. But Brian, here is something that was linked to the Politico reporting announcing that the White House had just named her as acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. She wrote a little op-ed claiming that she was framed for potentially being at the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. And the link takes us to a publication called Spectator Australia. And this is a quote from Maggie Clearary. She said, in the last 4 years, I've been somewhat cautious about sharing my experience about being wrongfully framed, with somebody claiming they had a picture of her at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. She asserts that that was debunked and she was cleared, but she was investigated for it, and she talks about that in this piece she wrote. And she says, I've been somewhat cautious about sharing my experience, but now, while Donald Trump is president, I feel emboldened to tell how I, too, was targeted politically. She goes on to say, I want to be U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia. This was some time ago when she was, I guess, angling to be U.S. Attorney down in Charlottesville, the Western District. She just got named U.S. Attorney acting in Alexandria, the Eastern District. She said, I want to be U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia to end this type of treatment. President Trump needs attorneys in these roles who understand how to identify this behavior and end it during this administration. So, as the Politico article says, the Post titled, I was framed over January 6th. Now I plan to end politically weaponized investigations, appeared first on the Spectator World website. Now, Brian, if that doesn't sound like an audition memo,
Yeah.
trying to catch the eye, the ear, the attention of Donald Trump, I don't know what does. When I read that, my mind went back to Bill Barr's audition memo to be Attorney General, which worked. Now, we'll see what she does as acting U.S. Attorney. We'll see if she is nominated to be the permanent U.S. Attorney, and if so, what the Senate might do in a confirmation hearing. But most importantly, and I think most directly at this moment, what is she going to do with a case that does not have enough evidence to indict it, but that Donald Trump desperately wants somebody to indict, and that is New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
And I want to dig into that in just a quick moment, but a quick note for those who are watching right now. If you'd like to support our work, support independent media more broadly, especially in light of the failings by legacy media, we have watched the Trump administration bear down on these companies, and these companies capitulate, whether it's ABC News, whether it's CBS, whether it's the Washington Post, whether it's the LA Times, and on and on and on. So there has never been a more important time for independent media. If you'd like to support us, our work is completely free. All that we ask is that you subscribe to our channels. I'm going to put the link in the post description of this video. Okay, so Glenn, going to your exact point of what happens next, we already know, because the Trump administration has come out and said it, that Trump wants a prosecutor in there who's going to basically move forward with a vindictive prosecution against Letitia James. We know that the existing prosecutor wouldn't bring it because there was no basis to bring fraud charges against Letitia James. And so if we do see subsequent charges by this new U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of Virginia, Maggie Clearary, won't that immediately show that she's engaged in a vindictive prosecution and completely undermine the prosecution that she's engaged in?
Absolutely. We may see, in the event Tish James is criminally indicted for mortgage fraud, and as you say, the evidence, at least as it's been publicly reported, shows there's no there. There may have been a pre-populated form that checked a box saying that she was going to use a particular home she was seeking to purchase as her permanent residence. But in all the other paperwork that she filled out, she did not say she was going to use that home as her permanent residence. And the reporting is that this one form, which was some kind of a power of attorney, didn't even have any role in the loan that she was seeking for that property. So it's beyond laughable that any responsible prosecutor would look at that and say, I think I can prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Absolutely not, based on the public reporting. So if, Maggie Clearary can find an attorney at the Eastern District Federal Prosecutor's Office, who is completely ethics-free and will go into a grand jury and try to convince a grand jury to indict Tish James of a felony crime, that will be probably the marquee vindictive prosecution defense that any defendant has ever brought in the history of the U.S. courts. I don't say that cavalierly. You know, part of what I taught year after year to my criminal justice students at George Washington University were the doctrines of selective prosecution and vindictive prosecution, both of which are due process violations, both of which will result in a defendant having a case dismissed against them. And from where I sit, based on the reporting, this looks like it would be a compelling vindictive prosecution case in the event Tish James is prosecuted. But let me hasten to add this, Brian. I do not wish for anyone to be vindictively prosecuted, but the first time Donald Trump can find flunkies to bring an evidence-free, baseless, vindictive prosecution against any of his stated enemies, if a judge, and I predict a judge will, figuratively cram that vindictive prosecution down the throat of the DOJ attorneys unethical enough to bring it, what will that do? It will expose Donald Trump as the paper tiger he is. It will expose how his threats of prosecution are meaningless because he can't bum rush them through the federal judiciary, specifically the federal trial court judges, all of whom have been holding strong, including most of the Trump-appointed judges. So whereas I don't wish to see that, I think there would be an important message sent to the American people, indeed the world, that Donald Trump doesn't have what it takes. He may think he's king or emperor or dictator, but he doesn't have what it takes to convict people without evidence.
And I understand the significance of that. But my concern is that there are still people who are both funded by our taxpayers and simultaneously abusing the legal system to go after Trump's political opponents. And so I guess my last question here is, what remedy is there for folks like Letitia James if she is the victim of a vindictive prosecution, given the fact that this is the U.S. government that is bringing about this prosecution? It's not like it's some private litigant. It's not like it's some civil case where Letitia James could countersue or take advantage of slap suit rules in certain states. This is the U.S. government that's going after her. And so is there any remedy if she is the victim of a vindictive prosecution?
Yeah, that's a great question, because ordinarily, Brian, we talk about how hard it is to bring suit against the federal government for doing something wrong to you because they have a healthy dose of qualified immunity or sovereign immunity. However, they only have that immunity if they're acting within the scope of their official governmental duties. And you know what is not within the scope of the official duties of a U.S. attorney? Prosecuting somebody for committing no crime, having no evidence, and bringing a vindictive prosecution anyway. That could actually result in a successful lawsuit that Tish James could bring against this new U.S. attorney and others who had a role in vindictively pursuing her.
Does that mean that a new U.S. attorney, Maggie Clearary, could actually have personal exposure in a civil suit if she kind of accedes to Trump's demands and brings about this vindictive prosecution?
It does, because if you're acting beyond the scope of your official governmental duties, you can not only be sued, but you can be sued personally, and you could be made to pay out personally any judgment that was entered against you, which is exactly what happened to Donald Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case. He tried to claim, no, this was within the scope of my official duties as president, defaming this woman. And the judge ruled, no, it's not. And we all know how that story ended. E. Jean Carroll won enormous money judgments against Donald Trump.
Okay, well, we will, of course, stay on top of this. This is a situation where I'll bet Letitia James is almost daring the Trump administration to go ahead with this vindictive prosecution, knowing full well that her defense is so clear, so obvious, and seems to be a home run. So we will, of course, stay on top of this. Again, a quick note for those who are watching: if you'd like to support our work, support independent media, the best way to do that is to subscribe to our channels. It is completely free. I'm going to put the links to both of our channels right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.